Well, hello everyone. This is Tiffany with Stephen Chia, and you are on another episode of Deep Dive.
That's right.
Yep. So, hey, Steve, do you know your neighbours well?
Pretty well, yeah. We all kind of get along.
Get along?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So, no squabbles, no quarrels anywhere?
No, I mean, I'm such a nice guy, you know.
You are. I mean, okay, but is your neighbour nice?
Yeah, they're good folks too. So, I mean...
They're watching this.
Yeah, they're watching this. No, but I mean, there are not too many of us, and over time, we've come to know each other. So, I think that helps a lot. When you know someone, it makes a difference.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm talking about this because we have recently read or even heard about the neighbour dispute in Boon Keng, where a resident had allegedly provoked and harassed his neighbours and then accosted them when they are in the lift. So apparently, with regards to this case, it has been going on for quite a while, and even the MP was involved.
Yeah, normally it's something that builds up over time.
Yes.
And in fact, the numbers are quite worrying. We have the reports here. Over the past 3 years, public agencies have received more than 90,000 complaints about neighbour noise. And that's about 80 complaints each day, especially when you compare it to pre-COVID figures of about 13 complaints a day. So that's a lot.
Yeah. So when I was looking at these stats, I was thinking to myself, if I have a difficult neighbour and I feel trapped in that situation, no matter what I have done, I mean, I could be like trying to reach out to them, trying to explain to them, trying to tell them, please, it's really hard for me, maybe the noise or whatever. What can I do if I am trapped in this situation?
So that's what we want to find out today,
Yeah.
and we have some guests who can help us hopefully dig into the issue a bit more and find some answers. We have Melvin Loh, a mediator and senior lecturer at the Singapore University of Social Sciences.
Hello, nice to be here. Thank you.
And also Nicholas Thomas, research fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies.
Hi Steve, hi Tiffany.
Welcome, guys. Melvin, I want to start with you. In your 18 years as a community mediator, what's the worst dispute case you have ever seen so far?
Well, I think worse is a strong word, but maybe I'll start with one that is pretty interesting. I think it's one of those that you would only think that you would see on TV, or essentially in dramas. Well, it's one of those whereby the neighbour upstairs was supposedly causing noise, and the neighbour downstairs it decided to match, or I would say give the neighbour upstairs a taste of its own medicine, and took a bamboo pole, and with each beat of the sound actually matched it.
Oh,
so
wow.
yes, that's one that comes to mind right now.
Okay.
What
Tit for tat,
Yeah,
quite
tit for
literally.
tat. Yeah, it's like baby shark do do.
No,
do,
no,
do, do.
okay.
Not quite sure if that entertaining.
Yeah.
What about what are any small cases, like really like the simplest or things that, I mean, what is simple to me may not be simple to you,
Right.
but what are some of the smallest things you have seen people get upset about?
I guess I'm thinking the things that surprise you when it comes to you and you're like,
yes.
actually, you guys could have really just sorted it out by talking to each other, that kind of thing.
So it could be as seemingly innocuous, something like as the doors closing. So what they will say is that not necessarily only because they can hear, they will say that you're doing it on purpose. You know that I'm home at a certain time and you're doing it when I'm home.
Okay.
So it sometimes creeps into the particular mindset, or maybe even assumption that you're doing this because you want to make me upset. So what I found through my years in mediation is sometimes, in fact many times, these things actually can be resolved by talking to your neighbour.
Right.
But unfortunately, I think there are many of us who perhaps don't do it as often. So yes, that's one of those smaller things that actually result in mediation.
Nicholas, what do you think upon hearing that? I mean, how much of this is, I guess, starting off because, I guess, just, poor human behavior, no communication, that kind of thing,
So actually I hold quite a different view to this, and there are 4 steps. The first step is they talk to the neighbour, they go to a grassroots leader, they bring it to the community mediation centre, and they really cannot, then they bring it to the tribunal.
Those are the steps to try and resolve a situation,
exactly.
right?
And I wonder, if we pull back a little bit and we use the frame of social capital, about the networks and the webs of relationships that we have. In a nutshell, bonding within groups, the people that you like and people that you know, bridging across groups, people that you don't like. In this case, it could be the neighbours dispute, and linking capital between the citizen and institution. And a lot of these levers today, in my view, tend to really focus on linking capital. You go to somebody with a higher power and they need to resolve the issue for you.
Oh, okay.
And I wonder whether actually the conversation should really focus more about what can we do about bridging capital. That means that the first 2 steps.
Okay.
That means you leave it within your neighbours, or even have that conversation with them. And so I really hold the view that actually a lot more needs to be done in the first 2 steps, even before it reaches mediation.
Right.
as almost like a last resort.
So in other words, we are going to that level simply because, well, we kind of haven't talked to each other at all. You know, if
Exactly.
we just started talking to each other, so many of these things could be
Exactly.
more easily resolved.
So IPS had this conference at Singapore Perspectives, and the Minister of State, Jasmine Lau, she shared a very interesting story. In her first few months as a politician, she met a resident, and they said outside the door, there was a very old rusty bicycle. And so she asked, have you had a conversation with your neighbour? And they said, no, but can you get the town council to remove it?
Yeah.
It's old. It so happened that the neighbour was there. And so she had the opportunity to bring that neighbour to have a conversation. Why the bicycle was there was because that resident's parent had passed away. And this was their way of remembering the legacy.
Oh.
And so if they had that conversation, it happened. But I suppose the troubling part about that story was that you needed an authority figure
Yeah.
for that person to just go next door to even have that conversation. And so that's why I really think that linking capital is always going to somebody, going to an authority, it's there. But if you had gone and had that conversation,
Right.
it'd be so different.
But it goes back to, I guess, what we used to have, that whole kampong spirit, that community lifestyle where doors were open, you could, oh, hello, John, hello, you know. Whereas now you kind of like see each other in the elevator, but you kind of like, let's try not to make eye contact so that I don't have to talk to them. So I mean, the thing is, time has passed, we have evolved, you know, habits have changed.
Indeed.
So the solution you're proposing in a way may not be realistic because people just don't operate that way anymore.
And I brought something, and this was Singapore Kindness Movement. And Singapore Kindness Movement was launched a long time ago.
Yeah.
And some of these data actually makes my whole proposition even more troubling. So I just shared 2 data points, right? And the first one is that neighbours can rely on each other in times of need and emergency. And that number has come down from 51% in 23 to 24 to 34%.
It has dropped quite
It's dropped.
significantly.
And there's a whole set of data that shows that it's dropped significantly.
Yeah.
And these are online perceptions.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that comes out online, so like Boon King, or it makes the headlines, are the ones that are on the outliers.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether we might become a society of affirmation rather than a society of complaint. When my neighbours come to me, and admittedly myself, and they give Christmas goodies to my kids, do we put it on social media and say thank you and this is what my neighbour... We take it, admittedly even myself take it for granted. But these are the signs of good deeds that we do for one another that builds those relationships, so that when my neighbour was doing this aircon piece and it was going to take a few days along, we understand and there's give and take.
So you build that brownie points in good days so that when the bad days come, that brownie points can kind of, soften the blow a little bit.
In a way, it's just being a bit considerate. It's just saying, let me think about it. If I were in the shoes of my neighbour, would I be upset to wake up one day and hearing, if you had just told me last week that next
you're gonna
Monday
start
I'm going to start, at
renovation.
least I know it's coming, right?
Yeah. But I think so far, I mean, as you guys were talking about the idea that, just have a conversation with your neighbours and everything, right? I feel like that is the ideal. I mean, that's where we all want to try to be, right? But the reality that a lot of people anecdotally tell me is that it's not easy to get my neighbour to see it from my point of view because if I'm approaching somebody and say that this is causing me discomfort, I'm uncomfortable, I don't like it, 100% the defenses are up.
Right.
And they're not interested to find out, is it my fault?
Yes.
Right? Most people would be like, I need to guard my family, I need to protect my space, I need to protect myself.
Yes.
So what if I am meeting a neighbor who's like that? Like how should I approach this situation before we even get to mediation and the tribunal and everything?
Yeah, so I think we're actually on the same page because I think it all begins with, not only having a conversation with your neighbor, knowing who your neighbors are. And ideally and hopefully, when you need to have a more, I would say, tense conversation, unfortunately termed that way, with your neighbour, it wouldn't be the first time that you're actually bridging that conversation. So it does begin from, by what Nicholas mentions, in terms of maybe those smaller actions and smaller conversations. At the same time, we also do have to appreciate that virtually 80 to 85% thereabout of us live in high density housing, whether it's apartments or whether it's HDBs. And the two most, I would say, commonly dealt with mediation kind of concepts or topics, if you will, are actually that of noise and smoke. Right? So these things do happen. These things will happen when people live close together. That is also coupled with how when we encounter a situation we necessarily tell the story and we're always the protagonist, we're always the main character, whenever the NPC with the exclamation mark on our heads walking around. So I think it's helpful to bridge that conversation and have that conversation with a neighbour and let them know what's happening. That's always more palatable as we share with whether it's parties or whether it's students or mediation than having the first contact that your neighbour has about this problem with a visit from the police, which unfortunately is what people do resort to. I would much rather prefer that. I mean, I'm not sure about you guys, but
is that culture again? Because I mean, sometimes you're thinking if you had just come and talked to me, I would have been sure, no problem, I'll remove it, you know.
But if I'm not confrontational, easier to press 999.
Yeah, so that's a part of it where we feel maybe it's I don't know, we feel awkward having to speak to someone that we don't know, or even to have difficult conversations.
Sometimes, I mean, unfortunately, whether it's scheduling or otherwise, you just simply don't have the opportunity to meet your neighbour.
Right.
Maybe the work schedule, the life schedule just doesn't sync up. That is also with the consideration of sometimes the neighbour doesn't want to talk to you for whatever reason.
Right.
And the only way you can get them in the same room is actually at, for instance, mediation. The number of times that I've actually had parties in the room, and that's actually the first time that they're actually seeing and talking to one another in person without correspondence through a lawyer or otherwise, is actually quite high.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that one's a bit tougher because it does take two to tango, right? So maybe you want to reach out, but you knock on the door, they don't answer, you've left notes, they refuse to reply.
Or they perceive knocking on the door as being confrontational.
Yes. And
Okay.
So what happens during mediation? Like take us through that process. Like how do you bring both parties to a consensus?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just speak about it generally because mediation takes place in different forums. But generally speaking, in mediation settings, the mediator actually doesn't sit as a judge, nor actually a decision maker. The mediator is actually there to sort of facilitate the conversation or the negotiation between parties. And the idea is essentially to have them share what they're concerned about. And then hopefully, in the course of hearing each other out, they gain a bit more perspective and understanding of each other's situations. And we figure out a way to move forward while also accepting and realizing that we're not going to have the stories sync up. Because you're going to have your version, I'm going to have my version. But there definitely must be a way, if we want to continue to coexist, to move forward together.
Can you give us a simple example of how someone came in with an issue and you were able to help them sort it out?
For instance, like we go back to the noise situation, right? It could be a situation whereby the neighbour upstairs agrees that for a certain time, they don't cause noise. And we know that typically in HDB blocks, it's anywhere from 10:30 p.m. to about 7 a.m. the next day. It could also be a situation whereby if the neighbour is willing, they would actually put maybe like stoppers, some socks on their furniture, or carpets. That's of course if they're willing. And the reason why I keep saying that they have to be willing is because in mediation, parties actually have to own the solution. If they don't own the solution, they're not going to follow it the moment they leave the room.
Yeah.
Sometimes even before they leave the room.
They will say they'll do it.
Yes.
But then after that, it doesn't show up at all.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So you want them to feel like the process is safe for them to talk about their issue. And at the same time, any solution they come up with are actually solutions that they want and therefore they're likely to follow through.
What happens if the neighbour doesn't want to come for mediation?
If it's a setting where it's community mediation, then obviously it's an invitation for the neighbours to come for mediation. And if one party doesn't show up, obviously the mediation can't proceed.
Okay.
And then the party that, whether the complainant or the particular applicant has to decide whether they want to escalate matters. So escalating matters might be, for instance, going through the courts and filing, for instance, a claim through the CDRT, the Community Disputes Resolution Tribunal, which is a court
process
whereby a formal, I would say, legal notice would be issued to the neighbour to attend court.
Okay.
So it's also the situation whereby if the neighbour doesn't show up in that setting, then there might be legal consequences that flow from that as well. The important thing to understand is that our legal system has evolved in such a way over the past decade or so, whereby regardless of what kind of claim that you are making in law, you're going to end up in mediation. It's just that I think for community mediation, and I stress this all the time, which is that regardless of what happens during the session, they are likely to go home and still live next to one another.
Right.
So you want to be sensitive to that situation as well.
Yeah.
Not to force people to mediate necessarily unless they fully understand what's going on.
Because if I'm suing somebody, I assume that he's not going to be my neighbor. I mean, in most cases, I don't sue people, like that. I don't sue people at all. But if I do, I don't have to go home and see their face. You know what I mean? But then with your neighbor, he or she will be, next door.
Imagine you
so it
both
gets a
leave
bit
mediation mediation together, drive along the same
Share,
roads,
carpool,
car park
we
next to each other.
Or share a ride, yeah.
Share, right? Even
Or
worse.
take the lift together.
Yeah, then that gets really
So
awkward.
in a way, that pathway is the least desired, right? And we go back to look at Singapore. We are multiracial, multicultural. Actually, we get along in so many ways. Why can't we get along in that way too? What is it about this aspect that do we need more education and understanding of each other to,
The reality is community disputes is I like to do what I want to do in my home, and then suddenly things get escalated so quickly and I need to show up at the state courts. But it started from something that's not criminal at all. I decided to play my drums at a certain time. It's not against the law. After 10:30, there's a norm, and then we should do that. But if you're playing your drums from morning to 10:30, technically you haven't broken any law, right? And so I come back to that point about what we do in our homes isn't criminal, but are we looking out for what's in the best interest of everybody else within the space? I recall some time ago where I lived, one of our neighbours, they had a new kid. And bless them, they had the kid. But then now what happens is 2 a.m., 3 a.m.
Lots of crying.
Lots of crying.
Yeah.
And it's relative, my experience relative to somebody else. And some of them were complaining. So that relative experience is very different for person to person. So I think it's quite difficult to say, because it's not criminal, it's relative experience.
Right.
It's very difficult to say what my experience is versus somebody.
When it gets to the tribunal, is that already criminal, or is it just like it's escalated to the point
It's escalated. It's not criminal.
Okay.
So the tribunal does have powers to issue orders, ranging from specific performance, asking you to stop doing something, or even imposing fines. But the whole point of the tribunal is providing a legal avenue if the mediations beforehand don't work. And I must say, we said community mediation, but actually the first port of call when things go wrong is the grassroots leaders get involved.
Are they trained?
They are
to
trained.
mediate?
They are trained.
Okay.
I think in the past 2 years, they've actually been training the grassroots leaders to mediate, sort of like to triage the situation.
Yeah.
The one thing sometimes is parties may feel that because they don't actually have a legal written contract or an agreement after that, so they may decide to go on to CMC and so on and so forth. But what I must say is that it does help to have the pool of grassroots leaders to be trained with that first aid, if you will. When it comes to the tribunal, the CDRT, it usually is the case where everything else perhaps hasn't really worked. And now they're really looking for a court to render a decision. So if you guys recall earlier when I said when you're in mediation, the parties are the ones that come up with the solution. So sometimes it may be that they simply just can't agree on a solution and they want someone to decide for them. Because at CDRT, they actually will look at for lack of a better word, evidence or documents, so on and so forth. We don't do that in mediation because we're not a court.
Okay.
Yeah, we are actually just trying to work through the conversations and I would say the concerns of the parties. The other thing also to take note is that actually lawyers are not allowed in CDRT.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
parties represent themselves.
Okay. But as a result of that session, can you come up with a list of guidelines? Okay, we both agree that we will do steps 1, 2, 3, 4. You sign off, I sign off, and it's in black and white.
You can, not necessarily in the CDRT setting, but CDRT will refer you for mediation at the state courts.
So still go back to mediation.
Yes. So that's what I
Okay.
mean by regardless, they will ask you to attempt. And of course, if mediation still doesn't work out, it will come back to CDRT and it will no longer be up to you because a judge
Okay.
will be deciding.
So the judge decides, okay, now from 10 o'clock, you cannot play Baby Shark on the water pipes
Yep.
until 7 a.m.
Yep.
Is that binding? Like it,
Yes, it's a legal.
The judge can
agreement,
pass
yeah.
a ruling. You will
It's-
not be allowed to
it's an-
play
and
Baby
then
Shark.
if the neighbor decides
court order.
to, okay,
So
okay, so
if-
they will
and
have
you're
to
breaking the law.
follow.
If they
okay.
breach it, then you have issues of contempt and you can go to jail and so on and so forth. Yes.
okay,
So
understand.
the question is, of course, yes, you have that avenue, but
I know.
we need to consider the consequences of it all.
I think we have to address a group of people who perhaps have mental health issues. They may be doing some of these things, not, I guess,
Unknowingly.
unknowingly. Yeah, I guess so. Have you encountered cases where the other party has a mental health issue?
I think, no, that's a good question. Ultimately, as mediators, I mean, I'll speak for myself because some of my peers are actually trained. I'm not a trained counselor, nor psychologist or doctor, so I can't diagnose anybody to see whether you have a condition. I think the best thing mediators can do with the experience and the exposure to the parties is you have an informed guess that maybe there's something more. this particular session may not be sufficient to actually deal with the concerns. The truth of the matter is that if there truly is some sort of concern as to the particular state of mind of the individual, then you also don't want to place yourself in a situation where the parties come to an agreement, because the person may not necessarily have the capacity to do so as well. If there are situations where, for instance, the grassroots leaders or maybe even the organizations have a sense or an indication that this person may have some sort of underlying condition, they do get the relevant agencies and authorities involved to sort of like conduct wellness checks and so on and so forth on the persons. Also because I think it may be hard to necessarily speak with your neighbor about the issue, quote unquote, that's happening if they don't fully appreciate what's happening.
So again, if you had just come and told me about this, concern you had, and I could have told you, I'm sorry, it's because my father-in-law has whatever, and then we could both say, okay, I'll try and figure out a way to make it softer and not as noisy. But again, it comes back to that point about, perhaps a bit more awareness and consideration. Do we need to come out with a little orientation guidebook when you move into your HDB, top 10 things you need to remember and bear in mind,
So someone told me that when they moved to Japan, I can't recall the name of it. I think it's Choi Naikai, or there was somebody there who welcomed them and things like that. But there's a subscription fee they need to pay and things like that.
So what does that do?
What are you subscribing to?
So somebody comes in, they inform you of your norms, they bring you on a tour of these other different things. There are some community activities and all. Basically, the PA equivalent, the People's Association equivalent there.
It's like an OGL.
It's like OGL, exactly.
There we go.
And so I think one of the things that, I think a huge shout out to the grassroots leaders who do this, because it's on their own time. I'm not sure even if they're paid. I doubt they are.
No, but does that exist now? Do we have that?
We don't have the OGL, but we have the grassroots leaders to do the mediation. I wonder whether we can have a block leader or leaders, right?
Yeah.
And so in the past, you would have this, I don't know what kepo is in English now. But
the busybody.
The busybody auntie who would say, you're coming home so late, your parents, and all of that. But actually, at their heart, they are looking out for each other. And whether people are feeding cats and things like that, and they will, they go and spread.
She or he is the mayor of Block 175.
Right.
Indeed.
Whenever a new resident comes in, they walk through and say, by the way, Mr. Lim in this unit has, dementia. So he may be acting a bit strange. This family just had a baby. So you set,
there's localized information. There's localized information.
So should the government appoint anti-busybody?
So I shared that linking social capital between the citizen and institution. There's a lot of things have been done there. And my own view is that I think government has done so much. I think we need to do a lot more as society. So recently I was at about smoking, right? So Christmas, we were there about 3-4 hours in my friend's place, and he would go to the kitchen and he would close his window.
Every
Periodic, maybe 30 minutes, 35 minutes. Then by the second or third time he did, we said, what is happening? So he said basically his neighbour downstairs is smoking. And basically the grassroots leader, they found a way to mediate. And the person will message him and he'll close his door. And I think one of the things that eventually it didn't hold out, because the person said, I'm not going to message you anymore because I did it out of goodwill. And so I don't know whether this will escalate. But I think if that couple who are smoking in that room think about what's good for my community around here. Maybe they should be closing their windows when they smoke. And so they can have their own leisure or whatever they need to do, their own habits, but not at the expense of their neighbours.
We should think for ourselves, what if I were in my neighbour's position?
Exactly.
How would I feel?
Which is the
Exactly.
question we ask as mediators when in the setting. In my own experience, of course, in mediation, most of the times neighbours actually do come wanting to resolve it.
Yeah.
So they actually come with the attitude of, you know what, I don't want to inconvenience my neighbour. How can we work this out? Of course, work this out meaning different things to each person. The important thing to also think about is that whenever I deal with them at mediation, they usually think about, okay, what if this happens again? And that's something I explore with them. But sometimes they actually agree not only to message one another. I've have instance where they set up a neighbour group chat whereby they'll inform each other not only about things, but they'll invite each other for gatherings and so on and so forth. So the idea is to essentially, hopefully, bring back some of that kampong spirit as well.
Very nice.
So there are happy endings.
They are.
Okay.
And in fact, most of the time, mediation does lead to a resolution. Of course, whether the resolution holds or not, it depends subsequently. But I think virtually about 80 to 90% of cases that come from mediation do resolve. And that's a good thing. Some cases do require further mediation down the road, but at least parties, especially when you're neighbours, right, come away having some sort of solution that they can say, hey, there's progress, let's try.
Yeah. But again, it comes back to the fact that we should try and preempt the situation, and steps like understanding your neighbours, getting to know them, understanding their situation will shape the way your expectations of them as well, right? And all that comes just from a bit of communication.
That's right.
Yeah, just talk to your neighbor. I like that. I like that what you brought up about the rusty bite. It's true. Just talk to your neighbor.
I think it's also a delicate balance, right? Because homes are expensive, so we want to be able to do what we want to do in homes. And at the same time, I think we for the most part, like what you said, being good people, good neighbors, you don't want to interrupt or sort of like inconvenience your neighbor. So there's that fine balance of how much do I intrude into my neighbor's space, to knock on their door, to leave a note. I even had cases before where they get upset because a neighbor left a note. Yeah. So yes, I mean the thresholds and I think the tolerance levels are different for people. So I mean for some of us, I think we put up with noise, even if it's a loud noise. If it's a couple of seconds, we're okay. But for some people, they will actually file a complaint. So it really does depend. And I think going back to the whole capital that you speak about, building a tolerance is actually quite important, especially in such a close-knit and close-lived society.
And I would tolerate you more if I knew you and I know that actually he's a nice guy. I don't think he's intentionally doing this, He's just hammering a nail because he's got to put up a picture, maybe,
What he's talked about, the brownie points earlier.
Yeah.
I think it's also important for residents, for people to understand what the avenues are. Pro Bono SG, for instance, has legal clinics where you can walk in and ask these questions. We do deal with community disputes on the regular. They even have community centers, legal centers to actually
there
help
are options,
queries.
but hopefully you don't have to go there.
Yeah.
Right?
I must say, though, I spend a lot of my time in legal clinics dissuading people from claiming if they can, because sometimes it's just talk to your neighbor. Because like what before, everything that we mentioned, if it escalates, it doesn't benefit anybody.
So there is no clear solution to this, but I think a lot of it starts with just if you're a bit nicer to talking a bit
to your neighbor.
more friendly to your neighbor and understanding the situation a bit better before you resort to all the legal routes.
And the other thing I learned as well is to nominate that auntie busybody.
Maybe.
Suss
Helpful
out.
auntie, helpful auntie.
Helpful.
Hey, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming in. And for all of you who are, watching this, of course, many of us all live very closely with our neighbours. If you have any thoughts to share, do let us know. We do love to hear from you as well.
See you next week.
Yep.